Merhabalar, İGAMTV'ye hoş geldiniz. Ben Elif Özmenek Çarmıklı. Göç Gündemi'ni arkadaşımız Nurhan Yönezer ve Anıl Adıdaoğlu ile beraber yapıyoruz. Bugünkü konuğumuz Beth Rottmann. Kendisi Özyeğin Üniversitesi'nde öğretim görevlisi. Hoş geldiniz.
Merhaba, ben oldum.
Ben de. Bugün genel olarak entegrasyonu konuşacağız. Önemli bir raporun Horizon 2020 projesi çerçevesinde hazırlanan Response raporunu da beraber konuşacağız. Öncelikle ben ne yazık ki programı İngilizce devam ettireceğim. Altyazıları daha sonradan eklenecek. Ama İngilizce olarak da izlemek isteyenler için önemli bir kaynak olacağını düşünüyoruz. Susan, welcome to our program. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
First of all, I would like to ask you about the integration in general. What do we really mean? I think in the literature, it's also changing what it has meant, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. So what do we exactly mean by this? And also maybe you can talk a little bit about the report. How is it, how is it this new integration form is in the report?
Yes. Well, what is integration? That's actually a really good question because, to be honest, even scholars don't agree what integration means. And in different countries, it can be used differently. It can be used differently by different people. A lot of people don't even really understand what they mean when they say integration. So it is important to think about what we mean. And I would say, first of all, there's not one definition. It's okay to have multiple different ways of thinking about it. But in general, it has to do with inclusion in the society. So it's the idea that migrants, when they go to a new country, they have to be, or they may want to be incorporated in some ways. So this can be either formal or informal. By formal, usually it's meant like labor market, education, healthcare, housing, all of the major systems that make citizens able to live in a new country. The informal kind of incorporation could be the way that people feel that they belong, their ability to practice their religion, their ability to, form organizations, or basically just live the way that they want to in their private lives. So when we think about integration, we can say that there can be policies from the government that help people to integrate. But then there can also be just how people live and on their daily life through going to the store, talking to their neighbor, having a job, they are in some way integrating. So there's kind of this tension between what's a kind of official integration or an integration program or an integration policy, and then the real or the reality of integration in people's everyday lives. So I wanted to look at both. I'm interested in both the report and also in my broader research. I can talk more about those findings. But also should I go right into the context of Turkey?
Get in there. I'm more interested, as you said, it's kind of interesting concept as we have formal and informal migration. We have formal and informal integration process. Yeah. In terms of informal integration, what do we see in Turkey? Maybe in general, you can talk about that. We can support it with the evidence from the report, but in general, what do you see about the informal and formal integration in Turkey? How are the levels?
Well, that's quite a big question. There's a wide range, I guess, and it's also quite different in different parts of Turkey and for migrants who have different resources, whether they're upper class, whether they're male or female, young or old. So there's a lot of differences in the extent to which people are integrated. But in terms of formal integration, some things are very positive in Turkey, I would say, in terms of healthcare, especially, for example, access to healthcare for refugees or people under temporary protection. Schooling and the labor market dimensions in terms of formal dimensions could be a little bit, have some area for improvement, I think, so we could talk about those in terms of details. In terms of informal integration, people from Syria have been living in Turkey since 2011, so that's almost 10 years. Their children go to school, they work, they move around the city, they know their neighbors. So in many ways, they're very informally integrated. I mean, they are, many of them say that they feel comfortable in Turkey, they feel close to the culture and the religion. There are some friendships between Syrians and Turkish people, local people, but of course there are also tensions, a lot of tensions in this informal realm. So it's kind of mixed, but I think we can see definitely informal integration too.
Yeah, and also it would be great if you could give like a little comparison. What was Turkey's integration policies before, maybe 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, and what are they now? Like, can we see a significant difference in terms of policies?
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, with the passage of the law on foreigners and international protection in 2014, I think it was discussed in 2013 and then came in force in 2014. This is like the beginning of a real policy to incorporate migrants. So in the past, as far as I understand it, most of the migrants were envisioned to be people who had ethnic Turkish background who would come to Turkey, and if they were given, a job and a place to live, they could integrate. Integration was not seen as a need because they were seen as soydaş or ethnic kin. They were seen as people who could, join. And then those people who married into the, intermarriage with another culture were relatively small numbers. But with the on foreigners and international protection and the establishment of the Directorate General of Migration Management, the idea of integration, or the idea of a large population of foreign people living in Turkey for a long time, I think started to become a idea that policy started to wrestle with. So within that law, there are provisions that the DGMM should be working on what's called social harmony. So in Turkey, the term is uyum, not integration, that people prefer. They've had different seminars. I attended one seminar run by the DGMM in Istanbul, where they talk about the importance of integration, or they have different community meetings. And so with that law came the other sort of, the ability for migrants to have work permits, the ability for Syrian children to go to Turkish schools, all of the other kinds of integration measures. But what a lot of scholars feel is lacking is a true national integration policy, like sort of a coordinated and clear statement about who will be staying and how will they be staying, what will be their rights, how does a person get citizenship in different conditions, or can temporary protection status turn into long-term residence. There's a lot of question marks about what long-term integration really will be like, or should be. And so in that sense, that's a kind of missing thing in Turkey, even though there are these different sort of integration provisions. One of the reasons that I think that's important is because I think there's a lot of misinformation and rumors and bad feelings, and people don't understand what the government wants to happen with Syrians or will happen. It's a highly charged, politicized topic, obviously. But if there was some kind of plan that could be debated, discussed, there could be input, there could be developed for integration, I think it would actually help to calm the fears and maybe improve the situation both for Syrians and for the local.
I think what was interesting, Turkey established the DGMM at the height of, receiving the Syrian refugees. So on the one hand, you have daily crisis that you have to solve. There was expectation that they would go as soon as possible. But at the end, it has been 10 years and we're still couldn't figure out. But you as someone who is an expert on the object and subject, you're saying there has been some development at least, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, as academics, we like to be critical and always, especially be critical of governments. And I mean, I can definitely, point out a lot of areas for improvement.
Mm-hmm. If you name a couple of them, what would that be? Like which areas that, in terms of integration, what are the areas that needs to be worked on?
Well, I mean, one thing is, a lot of research shows that integration really happens on local levels in communities when people are involved in working together to solve their problems or to get to know each other. Mm-hmm. So like, for example, in addition to having a national policy, it would be great if there were more community centers or places where Syrians and local people could come together, could talk about their problems, could meet each other. I think there's kind of like a lot of fears, and people on both sides are sort of unsure about what's happening in their communities. So, for example, doing more things to sort of let people be involved in debating the kind of community that they want to have, mm-hmm. and being able to meet each other. Because I mean, a lot of it, I think, is people are like, oh, those Syrians, they do this or they do that, and when in fact they actually don't really know, or they actually, if they actually had a chance to interact in a positive way, it could go a long way to maybe making people feel better about the situation. So I would say that, I mean, having the national policy is really good too, because one of the problems that we see is that there are lots of NGOs doing different things. There are, there's other things that are not being done, things are being missed. There's a lot of complications. So there's like a lack of clarity about who should do what. Even within the city of Istanbul, you have some municipalities that are doing a lot for Syrians, others that are doing nothing. No one really knows.
That I wanted to ask, actually, you had been a part of Horizon 2020 Respond project. It was a really big project. What are the outcomes of the project? What did you see in the field? What are the highlights of the report, actually?
Oh, wow. There's, a lot of things that I could talk about. The research was in 3 different regions of Turkey, so Istanbul, Şanlıurfa, and Izmir. So we definitely found what you would maybe expect, that Şanlıurfa, things are smoother in the sense that people sometimes share the same, are speaking Arabic with each other more easily, and people have already had ties across the border before the war.
Right.
So, yeah. So I would say that within Istanbul, I think there's quite a diversity in terms of some belediyes are really active and doing a lot for the integration of Syrians. Others are doing less. I guess one of the things that I have wanted to look at is the experience of Syrian migrants I think we shouldn't look at Syrian migrants as just a monolithic group. Like, they also have diversity within them. So one thing that we found is that younger migrants are actually more able to take advantage of employment, learning the language, finishing their education, whereas older migrants, sometimes the older men are not able to find jobs, the women are not able to learn Turkish, and they've lost their sort of respected social role. So it's kind of upsetting the family dynamics in different ways. So it creates some kind of tensions that there are kind of some generational differences.
Mm-hmm. And also in the report, you had different sectors. You looked at education, you looked at health services. What are the significant points in those? Like in education, okay, for example, you're saying younger generation is more capable of learning the language, so integration is higher probably. So what do you see in the education? Like, what are the main points?
Okay, well, in our research, we actually didn't do research with people under age 18 for I guess, ethical reasons or you know, the parameters of the research. So when I meant young people, I meant people ages like 20 to 35 or 18 to 35. But we did, of course, interview people about their children. And so we talk about that in the report. At the time, we did our research in 2018, so 3 years have gone by. I'm not sure if there has been much improvement. Probably the pandemic sort of put a stop to a lot of things that were done. But actually, education is I think one of the most pressing challenges, because 2/3 of Syrian children, at the time at least that we did our research, were in school, which means 1/3 are not in schools. And especially in high school, there's really high levels of student dropout, Syrian student dropout in high school. And that means that those children are not becoming educated, and there can be like a high likelihood that they will get involved in, you know, crime. We're definitely working in less than desirable jobs, you know, so getting all immigrant children into schools should be probably like the number one, one of the number one priorities.
Yeah. Yeah. What about the health system? You said it has been pretty good in Turkey, but I'm sure with the COVID, I've been observing with COVID, I think now vaccinations and everything has been done pretty well actually with foreigners. But I also wonder, what do you see in that field?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, just as an American, you know, no one can understand why Americans have like the worst access to healthcare in the world, and even I can't understand that honestly. So Turkey is like far and away way better than America in terms of access to healthcare. And I mean, the migrants that we spoke with were really, really feeling so happy. They mostly are able to get the treatment that they need. There's a requirement of being registered in the city where they seek the treatment, but otherwise, it's pretty good. And I mean, I think there are, you know, the small issues of like, you know, translation or transportation, or, you know, I couldn't.
Well, believe me, I lived in the United States for 15 years, so I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I love the healthcare here.
Yeah. I think translation language is a huge barrier, but I've been seeing a lot of Arabic pamphlets all around the vaccination spots, so that has been a big leap, I think, in terms of accepted, because in the United States, for example, you would go to a clinic or a hospital, you will see everything in Spanish as well, having you know, a large Hispanic immigrant community. Right now, I'm seeing that in Turkey, you know, having Arabic
it's great.
all over, like in the banks, in the hospitals. I think that was a big change in Turkey.
Yeah, I think that is something, in my opinion, something very positive. And it's great that the government mostly treats this large population, their public health is part of the public health of the whole country. So it kind of makes sense that they should treat them like.
I also wonder what you think about the different actors, their role in the integration, like, you know, civil society, as you say, municipalities. Like, what are the dynamics in there? What do you see in the field?
I mean, the main challenge is sort of like a lack of organization and coordination, which means that there are like overlaps and gaps. You know, you might see a lot of the same program, but then not enough of another program, you know. A lot of organizations want to run community centers and language classes, but then it's like, do we really need 2 community centers in this place? Or why don't you coordinate the time of the language class? Because everybody says there's not enough at this hour, but they're all being offered at the same hour. Like this basic, sort of a lack of coordination, I think is, which is something that would be solved if there was sort of like a national or even just a regional level of sort of coordination of the integration as a project.
So that should be the DGMM, or I think DGMM is that's whose job is that really? Like, do we lack an organization, like structure, or it should be a part of DGMM? I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally, yes. I mean, I think that there's different models in different countries, because on the one hand you have, for employment, you have in Turkey you have İşkur, and you have, the Department of Labor, you have the Aile ve Sosyal Bakan, and they have certain roles. So there are different government ministries that in different ways are responsible. So but I would think that DGMM could be sort of the coordinator of bringing in people and then setting supposedly in the report, I believe we talked about this, that the provincial Directorate of Migration Management, the PDMM in Şanlıurfa, is working very well. I think Zainab, one of the colleagues from the project, found that, like, for example, they invite IOM, they invite in other national NGOs. They are also coordinating with Kızılay, with all the different groups to sort of manage the process. And I think that is probably needed. Mm-hmm. Or in Istanbul, I was really impressed with Sultanbeyli Belediye in terms of their center in a 6-story building. They have every single thing that a migrant could need. Like, you can just go into that building and you can find out how to get a work permit. You can take a course, you can see a doctor, you can get registered for support. So the Belediye, they're not doing everything themselves. They're also working with other NGOs and other organizations, but they have sort of organized it. So I guess, yeah, I'm not sure if it should be DGMM or a Belediye or another group, but right now it seems to be still somehow just kind of disorganized, or, people
still didn't become a priority. I think that's the major issue. Also from here, I mean, we have short time left, but I also would like to ask a couple questions about the area that you have been working, belonging and gender. So it's quite interesting because integration, I guess, brings some kind of belonging.
Yeah.
So how do you see the connection between those two, and how do you conceptualize it?
Yeah, well, sometimes belonging is seen as not very important because people think, like, oh, well, they just need to get a job and, get on with their life. Like, who cares if they feel good in the country, or feel connected? But I think we can say that it's important for everyone to feel like they are happy in the place where they are. And I think that people also want other people to feel that way. Like, you don't want to live in a community where the person next to you is like, I wish I could leave here immediately. You want people want to be around people who want to be together. So it's kind of about belonging is sort of like feeling a part of a group. So, I mean, what has been interesting for me is that when you talk to Syrians, at least in 2018, this might be a little bit different today, but they were so happy to be in Turkey. They were really saying that they feel so comfortable. They love, the food. They love that it's a Muslim country. They love that they feel safe. It's so beautiful. It's so historical. Many people said they had a positive image of Istanbul before they came. They had seen TV shows about Turkey. So in some ways they are ready to belong, or they are ready to feel comfortable. I mean, a lot of them, there were even stories in the past of people who had migrated to Europe and came back to Turkey. But unfortunately, I guess, there's a lot of tensions in the community for a variety of reasons that you've probably talked about on this show in the past, but a lot of migrants.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so they have had, people do talk about bad experiences where somebody, was not friendly towards them, or, said you should return to your country. How come you didn't? Why are you here? you know, so they are, and I think that has gotten worse, you know, because as the economic situation has gotten worse in Turkey, and for a lot of other reasons. But
well, I think it's also interesting how belonging kind of goes in hand with the definition of citizenship, I think. In Turkey, it's also changing. What do you think about that? Like, how do you see the relation between those two? Because in the United States, and I'm an American citizen, so like, and I feel some kind of belonging there, but also I feel like I'm Turkish as well. I'm a Turkish American, and I'm quite happy about that, you know, having this kind of belonging to both sides, you know, and I'm pretty sure you as an American living here in Turkey, you don't have to be a citizen, but you still feel some kind of belonging. But acceptance has to come from the other side, both in terms of formal level, at the formal level, and informal level. So how do you see that, you know, citizenship, and what are the projects, your projection on the topic, how Turkey will progress?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I agree with what you said. I agree with everything you just said, 100%. And yeah, a lot of scholars would say that citizenship is the precondition for belonging. How can you feel belonging if you're not a citizen? In some ways, I mean, that's, I think, a valid question, because in reality, citizenship is what gives you the right to stay, to be, to vote, to get any benefits, to, you know, have those rights and duties of belonging to the country. So the fact that most Syrians still don't really have, not only do they not have citizenship, they don't even really have any way of being able to get it someday, you know, like there's not like a system like, oh, if you, you know, live here for 5 years and you can speak Turkish, you can get, there is some kind of exceptional citizenship process, but it's also not really clearly communicated, and it seems to be not really something that people apply for, but they're sort of given in different situations. So I think having a clear citizenship policy for Syrians would be like, yes, that's really the most, yes, that's the most important thing for belonging, for sure. It's a huge part of it. But
I think that's one of the issues why it can't be a priority in Turkey, because it kind of brings the hot political topic of citizenship to the table. So it has been a difficult journey for Turkey, but I think in 10 years there had been a lot of big steps. And also, you know, before the show, we kind of talked about your interest in gender, specifically women, in integration and belonging. If you can talk about a little bit about that too. Also, we have been, I mean, this is my observation, but I see that Syrian women are a little bit behind. You know, they are more hesitant to get involved in the workforce. So how do you see the future for them here in Turkey in terms of integration and belonging?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is kind of mixed, because you're right, they were not used to, most women were not used to working in Syria. The men were the primary breadwinners of the family. So they've come here, and in some cases women have started working, and in some cases they are saying that they feel more autonomy, more freedom, because they're, you know, more separated from their husband's family or their family, and they are able, you know, they speak positively about Turkish women's, you know, freedoms. But on the other hand, there are also a lot of cases of, you know, women who aren't really capable, you know, they're either not able or not willing to work because their husbands don't want them to, or they don't want to. And so they are not able to learn Turkish. They're, you know, very isolated, not meeting people in the community. It's kind of, you know, reinforcing their kind of isolation. And so and the roles that they had before are becoming even more limited. So they're going out less and seeing less people. So it's mixed. I would say, I mean, I think one of the biggest problems is just the pressure that families are under. I mean, if you want to know what causes domestic violence or violence against women or any kinds of problems in the family or divorce or, you know, all of the kinds of problems are related to, economic stresses, social stresses, the fact that they are really precarious. That was something I didn't bring up with this COVID-19 thing, even though maybe the access to healthcare has been that they've been hit really hard by the pandemic and a lot have lost their jobs. So that creates more stress in the family, and that creates more violence against women, and can potentially keep Syrian women in an even more limited position, vis-a-vis their husbands. So both programs and policies to support Syrian women would be great, but also I think just policies to support migrant families would also help women.
Yeah, we came to the end of our show. Is there anything else you would like to add before we end the program?
I don't think so. It's been nice to talk to you. If anybody wants to ask me any questions in the future, I would be happy to.
Well, thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for having me.
Sevgili İGAM dinleyicileri, izleyicileri, bugün konuğumuz Özyeğin Üniversitesi İnsan ve Toplum Bilimleri öğretim üyesi Doktor Suzan Beth Rottmann'dı. Kendisine bir kere daha çok teşekkür ediyorum programımıza katıldığı için. Gelecek hafta inşallah yine pazartesi günü saat 14'te beraber olacağız. Bir başka Göç Gündemi programıyla. Bu arada podcast olarak artık programlarımız yayınlanabiliyor ve lütfen YouTube kanalımıza üye olmayı unutmayın. Onu da hatırlattıktan sonra hepinize hoşça kalın. Gelecek hafta görüşmek üzere. Kendinize iyi bakın.